Hi, Dan Tokar here at the Willow Forge in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. And today on a Blacksmith dictionary, I'm going to show you a jig for making the eyes on forge welded strap hinges. Now, I think of it as a jig rather than as a tool because a jig is a special purpose thing generally used just for one specific purpose. It's not so much a general purpose tool. Sometimes you can use them for different sizes or scales of a particular application, but very often they're made just for use with one particular size and type of thing. So this is the jig that I use to make the eyes before welding them on strap hinges. This is a piece of 9/16 rod arc welded to a piece of 3/8 by 2 stock, sort of as a handle. And if you notice, it's got a particular shape that it's welded so that the bar was only up to the diameter, and the full diameter of the rod sits above the surface of the plate. What this will do is allow you to bend a nice sharp corner and make an eye which is repeatedly the same size. The reason this is a 9/16 inch pin is that you typically want there to be a tiny bit of clearance around the pintle so that you don't have a tight hinge. And there's also some shrinkage due to room temperature being smaller than at forging temperature. At forging temperature, you're going to shrink maybe 3 or 4% by the time you come down. So if you made a perfect 1/2 inch eye, it would actually be smaller than a 1/2 inch at room temperature. So you need to do that. And the same thing with the drift pin that you use to correct it after you welded it. These actually have to be very slightly oversized. I typically use a 9/16 inch pin for 1/2 inch because it still gives you a tiny bit of positive clearance on a 1/2 inch pin at room temperature. So I can show you my diagram here. This is kind of a rough drawing to give you an idea of what you need in the way of stock. So for this hinge, it's going to have a 1/2 inch diameter pintle, and the stock is 1/4 of an inch thick. So that little bit of math you see over there runs and gives you an approximation of how long the center line circle is for that. Now, I'm not putting in the numbers for the clearances because, again, you're going to have 1.5 inches there for the scarf for the weld. So what you're really going to end up doing is thieving a tiny bit of length from that to actually finish the loop. But if you see that red line that I've drawn in the diagram, that's the center line. And the center line is the true length of the bend you need to go around something. The inside is being compressed a little bit and the outside is shrinking, but the center of the bar stays the same length. So if you're going to bend around something, you need to measure what the center line is of your bend to get the proper measurement for length. So there's the math there, and again, this is an approximation because most blacksmiths are going to be measuring this with a tape measure, not with a micrometer. So anything beyond a 1/16 of an inch is probably overkill, but I just wanted to show you what the math looks like. All right, the demonstration on this is I'm going to use a piece of 1.5 inches by 1/4 inch, 1/4 by 1.5 inches, and I am going to take a piece of chalk and my ruler I'm going to move the camera so you can see me do this. I am going to measure on my vise the length that bit of math. I ended up with a rough approximation of 3 7/8 of an inch. So I go 3 7/8. Let's see, that's 3 7/8 of an inch right there. That chalk mark will let me know where I need to make my bend, the right angle bend that will allow me to get the proper length. I will have enough length here to make the eye and have the scarf. But first I have to make the scarf before I do the bend. I believe that for a good forge welded hinge, you want to have a scarf that is about as long as the stock is wide. So on a piece of 1.5 inch wide stock, I am going to make a scarf that's 1.5 inches long. Now, after you make the weld and forge everything back to the original thickness of the bar, you're going to have a longer scarf because you have drawn it will have extended and being drawn out to be the same thickness where the weld is as the parent bar. So you'll end up with a scar where the weld ends will actually be a little further along, so that in this case 1.5 inch scarf means that you'll probably end up with about a 2-inch long distance from where the eye is to the end of the scarf. Does not mean much. I mean, honestly, a forge welded hinge is kind of overkill with modern materials, but it's traditional, and if we're being blacksmiths, tradition does count for something. Alright, get this thing nice and hot. We're getting out of the cold weather around here. We had several weeks where it didn't get above 20 degrees during the day. I was still working in it, but it wasn't good weather to make videos. I've also had to take some time to help some friends that needed some help. So if you wonder why I haven't made any videos in about 6 weeks, I have been busy and it has been cold. Very hard to get good videography. Is that the right word? I gotta stop using those big words. Videography. So anyway, I get just a little bit on the end hot. I squeeze it down just a little bit. Taper it very thin at the end. You want a thin scarf at the end. And then I bevel it. Both edges are beveled. So basically my scarf is about 1.5 inches, and it is thicker. It is thickest in the center. It is thickest in the center. It is thickest in the center and tapers down. You don't want to have it go to an absolute knife edge because that will be too easy to burn, but probably about 1/16 of an inch on the edge. And again, about 1.5 inches long until you get back to the solid stock. We're going to heat this up. Now, the other thing you have to remember is that when you bend this around, you want the scarf to be on the proper side. The scarf should be facing the rest of the bar. So, got my hammer ready. Okay, so bring it out, take that off. So you have the scarf, and you want to make sure that when you bend it, scarf is going to be pointing Then I put this down like this. This way I can correct it to be straight and make a nice sharp. I want a nice sharp corner. So you have a bend like that, and the scarf is on the outside so that when it bends around the pin, the scarf will be on the inside, and it is the right length because we have the chalk mark on the vise. Now I'm going to heat up just this leg. This part will get a little hot just because it's associated, but I'm going to heat just that up and then put the jig in the vise and bend the eye. So there is the jig. It goes in the vise, and you open up the vise so there's a little clearance that'll allow you to put the two in together. Okay, so I got it hot. I put that jig and work in the vise and make sure they're tight together. And then I just hit this, and it bends the eye. And I can take the little curls out and make it tight, 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 tight. Make it smooth. Just gentle tapping. Alright, and while it's still hot, I can grab the handle here, take it apart, and you can see that I take the drift that I had sitting on the forge, and I can close this up, and you see it closed up around the drift. I drive the drift out. And one of the things I do one of the things I do that a lot of people don't is even though the scarf is on the inside, I tap the edges down so the edges are actually in contact with the body of the work. And you say, why do you do that? Why did you bother to put the scarf on the other side if you did that? Well, the reason I do that is because the thin edges of the scarf are now in contact with the body, and they won't burn off as quickly. They'll transfer heat faster. And the hammer is still going to hit the thick center section first. So it's not like I have trapped anything. The edges are still open. I'll put a little borax on everything. I got to remind people, borax is not glue, but you want to have a coating. And because I was explaining all of this, the work is not quite as hot as it normally is when I apply the borax. So it looks kind of like wool. Now I'm going to put the filter on the camera so that you can actually see the weld. So I've got my hammer ready and the work in the fire. So, you've got one heat to do the scarf. The second heat makes the right angle. The third heat makes the eye. The fourth and fifth heats are forge welding, because I probably could get a very good forge weld in one heat, but I like to blend it in a little better, and two forge welding heats will give you a very nice weld without having too much risk of burning off the little thin parts. One of the things I tend to do when I'm heating up something like a hinge weld is that I will get it hot from one side and turn it over in the fire to try and get the heat as even as possible. You do get a lot of heat transfer, but you don't want to get one side up to melting before the other side is up to welding. So sometimes you have to flip them 2 or 3 times. Anyway, it's coming up to heat. When I'm making sets of strap hinges, I typically lay all of them out and do the forge welds all in one day. So like I've got 3 pairs, 6 hinges that have gone out on this one project, and I did all of the eyes welded in one day, and I'll do the drawing and shaping on another, finishing out and temples on another. You try and be efficient. If you're doing things in batches, you get into a rhythm. You can make all of the scarves and bands and then do the forge welds one after another. So if I had those 6 hinges, I would just bend, do the scarfs on all 6 of them, and then do the bends on all 6 of them, and then the eyes on all 6 of them, and then weld them up. Alright, we're getting close to a welding heat here. Bright lemon yellow. The fire starts putting out a little sodium from the borax. You'll see a little yellowish tinge to the flames as the borax starts to burn off, boil off. Alright, here we go. And then you can drift it to make sure you've sized it correctly. I tend to make sure I'm taking the barrel fully round and make sure I've got it straight with the drift in. Then knock the drift out. It's shrinking as we go. Now, as I said, normally I would do 2 forge welds just to blend the weld in. But I'll tell you what one looks like, and a lot of people would say one is good enough because that is welded. If you look at that, the scarf is blended in mostly. Now, if I did the second weld, it would be a little tighter in the eye, but I don't need that for demo purposes today. That is, with the first weld, probably an 80% contact weld, and I could get that up to just about a perfect weld where everything blends in with the second heat. But anyway, that shows you how the jig works. So that simple little jig is how you can make multiples of eyes that are all the same size fairly quickly. Now, at the end of this, I've also got a little section at the end of this video. I've got a little section on the shop rules. I should have had an individual video just of the shop rules, but I don't know, it didn't strike me as something that could fly by itself, so I'm going to add that on to the end of this, and hope this helps. Bye. This is an ancient typed copy of shop rules that was found in Shepherdstown. If you open it, close it. If you turn it on, turn it off. If you unlock it, lock it up. If you break it, admit it. If you can't fix it, call someone who can. If you borrow it, return it. If you value it, take care of it. If you make a mess, clean it up. If you move it, put it back. If it belongs to someone else and you don't want to use it, or you want to use it, get permission. If you don't know how to operate it, leave it alone. If it's none of your business, don't ask questions. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. If it will brighten somebody's day, say it. Now here are my shop rules at the Willow Forge. If you must die or kill others, go elsewhere. This is a no-kill shop. I have that rule because I have had people in here who insist upon either trying to kill themselves or kill other people by creating dangerous situations, accidents. They just lack situational awareness or even the concept that they can be injured or killed. Rule number 2, if you set yourself or others on fire, it could lead to violating Rule 1. If you bleed, it could lead to violating Rule number 1. If you need help preventing bleeding or stopping it, ask Dan. If you wear safety gear, it helps comply with Rules 1, 2, 3, and 4, as well as preventing blindness and deafness. If you distract people doing dangerous work, it could lead to violating Rules 1, 2, 3, and 4. All work is dangerous. If you need to scream, do it at passing trains. Dan is the only one allowed to scream at people, except as it prevents violating Rules 1, 2, and 3. Then we continue on the next page, because there are lots of rules. The second page is, if you open it, close it. If you turn it on, turn it off. If you unlock it, lock it back up. If you break it, admit it. If you can't fix it, call someone who can. If you make a mess, clean it up. If you move it, put it back. If you don't know where it goes, ask Dan. If you don't know how to operate it, ask Dan. If you use it, take care of it. If it belongs to someone else, ask to use it. If you don't know, ask. And on the third page, we have, if you want to bring people to the shop, ask Dan. If a customer arrives, find Dan. If Dan is not there, ask the customer to wait or come back. Please don't negotiate or explain. Keep them outside the shop. Don't let them take anything away. If you need to borrow a tool, don't. What will Dan have to work with if all the tools are gone on a summer's day? If something is wrong, tell Dan. Now, we also have a corollary. I collect some of these things from seeing them around other people's shop. This is a problem-solving flow diagram that I found many years ago. This is how you fix things. You start off with the question, does the damn thing work? There's a yes or no to that. If you have a no, did you mess with it? Yes or no. Does anyone know? Will you catch hell? Hide it. Can you blame someone else? These are the sorts of things that are meant in a shop to be funny, but they sort of illustrate real problems and points.